good friends, and it's all covered.
Yeah, no, I figured there's plenty of food, so maybe we can change but like, we needed like extra hour for Thursday, tomorrow, or Sunday, so tomorrow.
Hi, I'm Judy.
Oh, same mom. I recognize your name. Like I said, I spoke with a couple of our other friends. I said, I know all the names. I may not have seen faces for a while. Oh, in our house. That was her 70th, I think. Yeah. What was last time? Oh, God.
Well, I mean, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. For everything, it's been very good.
oh my God,
Take seats. We could ask the French to take seats. We're going to be starting in just a few minutes.
Last quick time. Okay.
Family.
Wherever there's space. Yeah, wherever there's space.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Shalom. My name is Rabbi Josh Caruso. I'm from Anshe Chesed, Fairmount Temple. It is my honor to be here today as we pay tribute to Ruth Creed. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing and a time for wailing, a time for birthing and a time for dying, a time for speaking and a time for silence, a time for seeking and a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Ruth's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. I invite you to join with me now in the recitation of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, and my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. It is a fearful thing to love what death can touch. A fearful thing to love, hope, dream, to be and to lose. A thing for fools this, and a holy thing to love. For your life has lived in me, your laugh once lifted me, your word was gift to me. To remember this brings a painful joy. 'Tis a human thing, love, a holy thing, to love what death has touched. Dear God, this day, be with us, God. Wrap us in your presence like a blanket. Comfort our saddened souls. May the grieving family find solace in the love they share, in the devotion of friends and family, and in the knowledge of your sheltering presence. God, console us all in the faith that Ruth lives on among us, in every family celebration, in each of our smiling memories, in the legacy of her generosity of spirit, in her devotion to friends and family. Dear God, Shomea Tefilot, hear our prayers, find favor in this child of Israel, beloved wife, mother, grandmother, sister, aunt, and so much more. Cherished and admired, shower your presence upon her. May she be welcomed into your presence, O God, forever. And we say, Amen. So we're here today to remember Ruth. She is best and most lovingly remembered by her family. So many who are here today who shared such beautiful memories with me a couple of days ago, but you get to hear some of it in their words. We're going to first invite Ruth's children, Stephanie, Howard, and Rachel, and then her grandchildren will all share a moment together led by Robbie. Stephanie?
It's very difficult to sum up in a few minutes the totality of someone's life. I decided to focus on where my mom had the biggest impact in the world. My husband said that when he thinks of my mom, he always gets a mental picture of her cooking, baking, and other household tasks, whether it was in Cleveland or when she came to visit us or my sister in Northern California. The term homemaker really best describes our mom's number one mission in life, to make a good home for her husband and children. She was an excellent wife, a mission that ended far too soon for her due to our dad's death 25 years ago when she was only 60. Happily, she was able to carry on with her mission of motherhood, going from her children to the next generation, our children, who you'll hear from later this morning. So many of our mom's personal qualities live on in us in one form or another. Mom had a very keen sense of aesthetics, whether about home decor, how she dressed, or how others dressed. I feel blessed to have absorbed her excellent sense of how to mix colors and patterns harmoniously, including her preference of color paint over white walls in any room. I see some of this reflected in my siblings, too. When Mom had to move from her independent apartment at the Rose to assisted living, one of our key concerns was how to get her apartment painted with a green that she liked before she moved in. Mom was also a supremely organized person when we were growing up, as befitted a military wife with 4 children to manage. We didn't always appreciate her love of routine and organization in our everyday life, but it enabled her to plan some amazing family road trip vacations long before finding interesting hotels and activities just required a little scrolling online. For example, one year we drove to Canada, visiting Toronto, Montreal, and Quebec City. And yet another year we went to Kentucky, Tennessee, and North Carolina. The highlight of that trip for her was panning for emeralds, her birthstone, in North Carolina, and finding one suitable enough to make into a ring. I can only imagine the phone calls and the legwork that these trips required. On these trips, it wasn't enough to stay at any roadside hotel. Mom always found interesting and unique spots, from the Chateau Frontenac in Quebec City to Shaker Village in Pleasant Hill, Kentucky. Back in the 70s, these vacations were really quite unusual. Family, with a capital F, was our mother's core value. An example of this was Mom's keeping meticulous track of all family birthdays and anniversaries, including aunts, uncles, and cousins, with lovely cards being sent for almost every single one, year after year until very recently. Her constant reminders to us of this cousin's birthday, that couple's anniversary, may have been annoying, but it definitely embedded in us the importance of keeping track of family and fostered the feeling of being part of the larger family unit. In looking again recently at photo albums and online pictures, I'm struck by how frequently we siblings, our families, and even extended family have spent key milestones with each other, often requiring significant travel to make that happen. I'm grateful that the last few years have included some wonderful occasions where we were the ones planning for Mom to enjoy, from her joyful and well-attended 80th birthday party to a family trip to Port Clinton to smaller and more recent weekends away in Columbus. We, my sisters and brother, absorbed the value of family with every breath we took growing up. We honor her legacy by continuing to be an active part in each other's lives and demonstrate our love, not just with words, but by showing up. If our mom had the ability to see us this last few days, and I like to think she does, she would be proud.
As Howard comes up next, I just want to ask everyone to double check their phones, make sure they're silenced or turned off so we can just hear the family here.
Most of you know that Mom was a terrific cook and baker and passed along her food obsessions to all of us. I thought it would be appropriate for my remarks to pull from an essay that I wrote for an introduction to the cookbook my dad and siblings pulled together for Mom's 60th birthday. I come from a sect of Judaism I came to call culinary Judaism. This is not to disparage my spiritual upbringing, for it was warm and full of meaning. However, due to Mom's fabulous cooking, I came to associate festivals with a particular meal, almost as much as the religious component itself. Each holiday had a series of dishes to be served that seemed as if they'd been handed down directly from Abraham and Sarah's Guide to Jewish Cuisine, or Canaan on 4,000 calories a day. The year started almost concurrent with the school year with Rosh Hashanah, apples, honey, noodle kugel, and simmus served at an early afternoon meal. The meal was served and eaten in haste as we had to get to the early service. Next on the calendar was Yom Kippur and the attendant feast and fast. One benefit of eating so early to make the first service came when scheduling the break fast. The noshes were out well before sundown, easing our pain. Coffee cake, pickled items of unknown origin, and various fish items began the fresser's delight. There seemed to be a Jewish macho quotient, or jucho, associated with eating whitefish, herring, and gefilte fish. If you ate any one of these items, your lineage was clear. Anyone who enjoyed all three was clearly descended directly from Moses. The Hanukkah meal could be summed up in three dishes. Latkes, red applesauce, and prime rib. This applesauce, with its cinnamon sweetness derived from candy red hots, is unique. I've never seen it or tasted it anywhere else. The latkes were perfect too, not too crisp or soggy, but exactly right. What can I say about the prime rib, but that cow should have been proud for the sacrifice for a noble cause. Passover was and remains my favorite holiday. I love the telling of the Exodus story, even when using the syntactically challenged Maxwell Haggadah. The Seder portion with matzah, horseradish, haroset, and haroset was a treat as well. These were not foods you would eat at any other time of the year. However, horseradish you might eat, but not with that Hillel sandwich, magical combination. I can't finish this essay without a few words about the eyes of the hurricane that was the Creed family, Mom. Mom had her ideas about certain things, well, everything really, and they were clear. Being a new parent at the time, I've read about the importance of consistency in setting discipline and structure for children. Mom intuitively understood this without Parents Magazine to explain it. Rules were clear for us and we strayed at our peril. One example was the weekday morning breakfast. Mom had decided back in the dawn of time she would prepare our breakfast every morning so we would have a nutritious start to our school day. Never mind the fact that she wasn't so thrilled to be up that early in the morning and cooking, especially given the unappreciative little diners. Never mind the fact that she often served items that were not liked by all four of us, causing permanent dislike of certain breakfast foods. Any voicing of opinion during that meal was met with the same enthusiasm that met a free market-loving peasant farmer under Stalin. Regardless of all of the above, we had that nutritious start to the day, and our love truly shone through. Mom, on your 60th birthday, despite my sarcastic sense of humor, I want you to know how much I love and cherish you. I hope you enjoy this cookbook as much as we will throughout the years. And Mom did love the cookbook, and we, her grown-up children, cherish it for the memories of her food and her love.
There's a reason I didn't speak at my dad's funeral. I'm older and a little bit wiser now. Oftentimes, when I reflect on my childhood, one of the first things that comes to mind is how much jewelry and accessories my mom had. So much so, in fact, that the multiple years I didn't know what to be for Halloween, coupled with the fact that there was no way in hell she was going to make me a costume, this because maybe I was the last child, I had only to head over to her giant multiple drawer jewelry box and I could easily become a fabulous 60s or 70s themed fashionista. She always had great taste, not only in fashion and food, but when it came to a life partner as well. Life is a journey, and while we all know the end will come eventually, it's never a certainty how that end will look. My mom's journey was following a pretty predictable and traditional path for the times. Meet someone, get married, have kids, focus on raising your family, get the kids launched, then sit back and relax, enjoying your time with your hubby, and eagerly awaiting the days when your now grown children announce they too will be getting married, or maybe having kids first, and let's face it, much more importantly, giving you the grandkids. But then my dad was diagnosed with cancer. Losing him at the relatively young age of 66 put a stop along this path. To be honest, it changed my mom. My dad was the love of her life. And naturally, she thought he was going to be around much longer. She did the best she could. But sometimes it was noticeable that she wasn't as interested in some of the same things she was as before without him here. She eventually returned to some semblance of normalcy and threw herself wholeheartedly into visiting those of us who lived far away and also into being the doting grandma to her grandkids. Fortunately, she had local ones as well, so then I didn't feel as guilty living so far away. She started playing mahjong, which became quite the weekly event, and she also started needlepointing like crazy, creating beautiful framed pieces of art and even some pillows. All of these things gave her joy, but I remember a conversation I had with her on the occasion of her 80th birthday. We were sitting in her apartment on Van Aken. I believe I mentioned how we had this big party to look forward to, and she point blank said she didn't feel like there was much to celebrate. 80 is almost the end. Yep, that's my mom, never mincing words. I honestly just looked at her and wasn't really sure what to say or respond. While, of course, this was mostly a pretty factual statement for anyone in their 80s, I certainly didn't want her to live whatever time she had left feeling like it was the end. I'm not sure how well I was able to cheer her up in that moment, but I can say she went on to have what looked like an incredible time at her party. After all, this was my mom at her best, being with family, socializing, and just joining everybody together. I had so many other things I thought I was going to say up here, but of course I didn't jot them down as they came up, so. But I would definitely be remiss if I didn't mention her baking. My love of baking was definitely inspired by her, and specifically the birthday cake that she frequently made for each of us, which was her chocolate fudge cake. Also like her, I started my own little side baking business back home in California. There's a wine bar by the beach near where I live that has been selling this cake of mine specifically for almost 13 years now. The best part is, in this age of technology and social media, of which my mother wanted no part of any, there are even online reviews of the cake. For instance, it has been referred to as heaven sent and a must-have. My mother did not believe in using technology of any kind, but now her cake, along with her legacy, will live on forever that way.
There is a stereotype of a proud grandmother that most people can picture, bragging loudly and incessantly to her friends about her grandchildren and what they've accomplished. Our grandma took it one step further because she was constantly bragging about her grandchildren to the other grandchildren. Without fail, whether it was a Sunday night dinner in Ohio or a phone call to California or Georgia, Grandma made sure that all her brood was up to date on the latest sports, school, and career happenings. We were separated by thousands of miles for 99% of our childhoods, but Ruth Creed made sure the distance did not make us distant.
She was the glue bonding our generation together. All 7 of us sat together on Tuesday, which is a rare occasion, and we discussed how we wanted to honor her memory today. Some remembrances were universal. For example, one constant in our lives were her birthday cards that came without fail every year in her distinct handwriting. Then the birthday phone calls where she would always launch into happy birthday to you without any introduction every time. Birthdays, holidays, special occasions. If she could be there, she would. And if she couldn't, she made sure you knew she was thinking about you. Another constant was her food, as everybody has mentioned. She took care of her family through food, and that extended to the grandchildren as well. For Caroline and I, Sunday nights meant dinner with Grandma, rotating through an extensive and familiar repertoire. The real highlight, though, is our birthday dinners, where we were in charge of choosing the menu. For me, I got a yearly French silk pie, and Caroline got her famous chocolate fudge cake. Although the other cousins were usually not in town for their birthdays, the memories of Grandma showing her love through food remained. For Gabby, it was her banana cream pie. For Daniela, her turtle bars and brownies, just to name a few. The food, of course, was always delicious and extremely rich, but its meaning was not grounded in flavor. It was meaningful because it was a consistent reminder that we were cared for. We all grew up with the reassuring presence of a fan who cheered our successes and comforted us in our struggles. Stuffed cabbage, calls, hugs, and birthday cards were all just different signs of her presence in our lives. Decades after she became a grandmother, Gabby, Caroline, Julia, Daniela, Michael, Ari, and I can sit around and share our favorite stories or memories of her together as a family. Julia remembered that Grandma always sent her special stickers with her birthday card, and Gabby remembers that her and Grandma shared a special song at the end of their phone calls. We remembered her huge collection of VHS kids movies back in her condo, just for us. Watching her play Mahjong, the very particular shade of greed that she loved, her daily ritual of iced tea with lemon, her colorful clothing, and her big personality. We remembered secondhand stories of family lore that Grandma had shared with us over the years and mused on how good of a storyteller she was. So much comfort was found by reminiscing and sharing our collective memory of the little things that made Grandma Grandma. All along, she was playing the long game. The food wasn't just food, and the stories weren't just stories. They were the foundations of shared experience that unites us as a family. For that, we are all sincerely grateful. Thank you for everything, Grandma. We will miss you so much.
In the Jewish canon of Scripture, it is common to read from the book of Proverbs when paying tribute to one's wife, to one's mother, known to many as the woman of valor or Eshet Chayil. The words speak to a more conventional idea of a woman's role. A closer look reveals a profile of a well-rounded person of any gender, whose contributions to family and home are worthy of lifting up. I will share an adapted version with Ruth very much in mind, as much of it echoes her essence. Eshet Chayil, a good woman is hard to find, and worth far more than diamonds. Her husband trusts her without reserve and never has reason to regret it. Never spiteful, she treats him generously all her life long. Indeed, a woman like Ruth is hard to find. Her husband Stanley met her in New York. Ruth was visiting a neighbor, hoping to find a cup of sugar, and found love instead. Marrying a career Air Force serviceman meant lots of moves. Illinois, Texas, Maine, Massachusetts, Guam. They were all temporary homes, but also led to a rich life of travel. Still, once the family landed in Shaker, Ruth was eager to lower the anchor and make Cleveland a permanent home. A beautiful partnership ended far too soon with Stanley's passing, and the precious memories traveled along with her for the rest of her days. Caroline mentioned how when sitting with her grandma at services, she would often tear up when the mourner's Kaddish was read. And even so, Ruth was a survivor. She brightened her days with vivid colors and found joys in life still open to her. I continue with Eshet Chayil, this woman of valor. She shops around for the best yarns and cottons and enjoys knitting and sewing. She's like a trading ship that sails to faraway places and brings back exotic surprises. Ruth was filled with flair. Aesthetics were important to her. Pins, brooches, earrings. Fashion was important to her. In fact, she even started an interior design business with her friend called Ruth Creed Interiors, one of her many entrepreneurial pursuits. Sometimes we recall our loved ones through our senses. Ruth's daughter Sarah shared this memory. Her signature perfume, which was Estee Lauder, it just stands out to me how glamorous she was and how wonderful she smelled. Back to Eshet Chayil. She's up before dawn, preparing breakfast for her family and organizing her day. She looks over a field and buys it. Then, with money she's put aside, plants a garden. First thing in the morning, she dresses for work, rolls up her sleeves, eager to get started. She senses the worth of her work, is in no hurry to call it quits for the day. Ruth was a planner. There were the epic family car trips for Stephanie, Howard, Sarah, and Rachel to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and Cape Cod, North Carolina, Montreal, Vermont, and the list goes on and on. Anticipating the next trip, Ruth would prospect out new and interesting spots to visit and to stay, and she never disappointed. Caroline and Robbie remember secretly watching Ruth prepare in the morning, one morning in the kitchen, marveling at just her process. Sarah clearly remembers her mom as the mover and the shaker. She shared again, "My mom was always present," as in she was very involved with what we had going on, whether sports or band or choir, she was there. She was the epitome of a PTA mom. And even though at the time I might not have appreciated her involvement with our school, I could now see how lucky I really was. I never truly appreciated the structure and stability my parents gave to me. But of course now, as an adult, I surely do. Eshet Chayil. She's skilled in the crafts of home and hearth, diligent in homemaking. I think this poem was written for Ruth. Ruth was an extraordinary homemaker. She was a great cook, as you've heard. Every holiday featured this rotation of favorite dishes. Food was one of the primary ways in which Ruth showed love. She took note of the foods and dishes you liked and kept them in her memory bank. Her act of love was preparing the same foods for you on your birthday or at special occasions. Lou, her son-in-law, talked about the delicious French puffs she would make for him because she knew how much he loved them. On a visit to California, she even brought them along in a freezer bag, packed away in her luggage. While she never let anyone enter the kitchen when she was cooking or baking, each one of the kids has centered their lives on cooking as a love language. Eshet Chayil, this woman of valor. She doesn't worry about her family when it snows. Their winter clothes are all mended and ready to wear. She makes her own clothing, dresses in colorful linens and silks. In whatever season it was, clothes were not only important to Ruth's own sense of fashion, it was important to establish a clothing ethic for the kids. They would have to abandon any designs on wearing the cool sneakers they wanted to school, and the girls were forbidden to wear pants until they were old enough to decide for themselves. Proper deportment was a must. Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. Her clothes are well made and elegant, and she always faces tomorrow with a smile. When she speaks, she has something worthwhile to say. She always says it kindly. She keeps an eye on everyone in her household and keeps them all busy and productive. Elegant indeed. I have had the privilege of knowing Ruth throughout my time serving Fairmount Temple, the faith community of which she has long been a part, and just simply being and connected to Ruth's family and Ruth's son Howard and Laura and their kids. Ruth's steady presence, her grace, her confidence, her warm smile always made me smile. I could see the pride she felt for her children and grandchildren. Ruth was always a fixture at the Townley Road 4th of July block parties. In my civilian life, I lived down the street from Howard and Laura, and that afforded me extra opportunities to see the family matriarch. Behind that beautiful smile was a fierce woman who, as Laura put it, loved fiercely, and who also had opinions. And Ruth was not hesitant to share them. That said, everyone in the family knew that when she did speak, she did it from an earnest place of love. She had an implicit understanding that every day she got to spend with family was a true gift. And she lived for those moments. Ruth cherished being a grandma. She wanted to know everything going on with Gabby and Julia, Caroline and Danielle and Robbie and Michael and Ari. She relished having grandchildren in town and made special reach out to all those who lived away. As they said when they were up here, they really all felt her love. A little over a year ago, I officiated at a memorial service for Ruth's brother, Paul. Ruth and Jimmy, who's here today, shared warm memories of their sibling, and Ruth talked about how close she felt to Paul. Here is a small excerpt that I shared on that day, as really told to me by Ruth. Paul came into Cleveland for Ruth's 80th birthday, and Ruth, as a surprise, traveled to New York City for Paul's milestone birthday himself. When he saw his sister, her visit was kept as a surprise. His jaw nearly dropped, and he joyfully exclaimed, "That's my sister!" They held hands the whole time. Ruth told me that when she was a child, she would follow Paul, her older brother, everywhere he went. And she really loved her little brother, Jimmy. Just as Ruth wished to follow and emulate her brother, so too do her children follow her lead. She seemed to know her role, the storyteller, the family historian, the giver of boundless love, and one who received so many blessings from the generations who followed. I could still see her at these block parties sitting there, holding court, looking stately as ever. We were just drawn to her. Oh, Ruth will not soon be forgotten. No worries. Zichrona livracha. May her memory forever be a blessing. And let us say, Amen. Let us take just a moment as we think about the ways in which Ruth may have touched your lives. I invite you now, as you are able, to rise at your seats for the chanting of the memorial prayer, Al Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, B'malot Kedoshim Mutorim, Kezohar Arakia Mazirim, Et Nishmat Rachel Bat Chaim V'Aida, Shalaha Leholama, Began Eden Tehei Menuchata, Ana Bala Rachamim, Hastireha, Beseter Knafecha Leolamim, Utror Bitror Achayim Et Nishmata, Adonai Unachalata, Vetanuach Beshalom Al Mishkava, Venomar Amen. El Malei Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Ruth Ellen Creed, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. As we turn to the conclusion of our service, we'd like to mention once again that Ruth is survived by her brother Jim and Kathy, and the proud mom of Stephanie and Jerry, Howard and Laura, Sarah, Rachel, and Lou. She was an even prouder grandmother, as the obituary states, to Gabby and Julia, Caroline, Daniela, Robbie, Michael, and Ari. As we conclude this service, the family will move to Mayfield Cemetery, where the interment will take place in the mausoleum. So Ruth will be reunited with Stanley. Family will be receiving visitors at the home of Howard and Laura Creed, 3609 Townley Road. Today, after services, after the interment at Mayfield Mausoleum, until 8 p.m. tonight. And Friday, tomorrow, noon to 6, and Sunday, 10 to 1. Donations may be made in Ruth's honor to either the Cleveland Food Bank or the Legal Aid Society of Cleveland.
We ask those of you who are going to the cemetery for the interment, when you step to your cars, please turn on your headlights and your flashers. We'll ask everyone to exit towards the rear of the chapel.